the fact that not only did AOC decide to endorse the sitting incumbent president for re-election, Joe Biden, even though there are two primary challengers that he has, Marianne Williamson and RFK Jr., as well as a third-party candidate who's running, Cornel West, who supposedly espouses ideas that AOC at least once pretended to believe in, much more so than she pretended to believe in the ideology of Joe Biden. She not only endorsed Joe Biden without even waiting to see who would be running against him. It's still possible there could be other primary challengers that he has. She didn't even pretend to extract any promises from him. Remember when the right wing of the Republican Party, when Kevin McCarthy needed their support to become House Speaker, they very openly refused to give that until they extracted all kinds of promises about how power would be wielded in the House in a much more diffuse way. She didn't even pretend to do that. And then to add insult to injury, the place she chose to unveil her endorsement is the podcast Pod Save America, hosted by Obama administration national security officials who are complete and steadfast loyalists to the Democratic Party. You wind them up and they heap praise on not just the Democratic Party, but it's on all of its leaders. It's basically a place where the Chuck Schumers and Nancy Pelosi's of the world go to talk to their loyal flock. So let's look at her doing this, and I'm going to I don't even have to ask you a question, Nick. You're going to be all ready just to spout all sorts of things once you hear this. So I'm going to subject you to this one more time, and I apologize in advance. But for anyone in our audience who did not see it, here is AOC formally endorsing the current Democratic incumbent president, Joe Biden.
The president's only primary opponents are Marianne Williamson, Robert F. Kennedy Jr. Haven't been any rumors about anyone else even thinking about jumping in. Will you be supporting Joe Biden for re-election?
I believe given that field, yes. I think he's done quite well, given the limitations that we have.
He's done quite well, Nick, given the limitations that he has. So let me just go on. I just needed to stop that there and note that.
I do think that there are ebbs and flows, as there are in any presidency. You know, there are areas that I think were quite strong when he came right out of the gate with the American Rescue Plan. And of course, the Inflation Reduction Act was a massive step in terms of our climate agenda. But, you know, there are also areas that I think could have gone better. We have major structural.
Did you hear how she phrases her criticisms? There are things that could have gone better, meaning I will admit he's not perfect. All right, let's just finish this.
Issues in this country. And I think it starts with the United States Senate. And I think that until we have senators that are willing to stand up and stare the filibuster in the eye and stare a lot of structural issues about the Senate, and the United States Senate will be what holds back this country from an enormous amount of progress.
So she was willing to admit reluctantly that Joe Biden is not in fact perfect. There are things that could have gone better, but she very quickly added that it's not his fault in any way. It's the fault of the Senate, particularly Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, and it's the Senate that needs to be fixed for Joe Biden to be perfect, but he's certainly extremely good and therefore merits her endorsement. What is your reaction to that, Nick?
That shows how AOC's job is just to do PR for the Democratic Party, because she's head faking to the legislative branch as if the left's biggest criticism of Joe Biden is what he has not done. Our biggest criticism is the fact that he's about to start World War III because of AOC. And AOC used to stand for abolishing ICE. Now you have Joe Biden who's funding ICE $6 billion more than Donald Trump, deported more people than Donald Trump. Now this is not an issue she cares about. She pretended to be a climate activist for clout for years, and now she endorsed a president who is spanning out the Willow Project, who is a fracker, who actually did more public drilling than Donald Trump. But she's not a climate activist when a Democrat is in charge. She's a climate activist only when a Republican is in charge. And I think this shows how weak Joe Biden is right now. Because in the last election, they had to make a progressive task force to head fake and pretend that they're going to get progressive policies. There's none of that now. And there's zero excuse for anyone to endorse someone with a horrific record like Joe Biden a year and a half before the election. Their job is to lead workers off a cliff and undercut our negotiation power. Now is the time where we had the most negotiation, and AOC seeing how weak Biden is in the polls, often also because RFK and Dr. Cornel West, who is already polling at 6%. So they can't even play around. They was given the order to endorse immediately, which shows how weak Joe Biden is that she had to do this.
Do you remember the time in 2018 when she picked out a really striking outfit, all white? It was very dramatic, and she put it on, and then she went down to the border and she posed in front of a camera that was wielded by her staffer in front of that fence overlooking a parking lot. But it was eventually, if you traverse that parking lot, you arrived at the place where migrants were held, and she posed in these very pained and anguished ways because she was so deeply moved as a human being about the cruelty at the border. Nothing has changed at the border. Absolutely nothing has changed about the border. And she has not even gone down there or even barely mentioned the border. And the thing I genuinely don't understand is how people don't end up being offended by this. The fact that they just so blatantly trifle with people's emotions in ways that prove so completely inauthentic.
And that's the argument that we make at Revolutionary Blackout. Who's really worse, Glenn? Joe Manchin, we know he's an asshole. He stands on yachts and shout down protesters. I don't know if you've seen that famous video where he was on a yacht shouting down protesters, openly takes millions of dollars from big oil and all these corporations. So his mindset is, if you vote for him as a leftist or as a worker, it's kind of your fault because he's not hiding who he is. I will make the argument that it takes a special kind of evil and maliciousness to do what AOC and Bernie Sanders has done. And the professional managerial class, for the most part, has protected them from the reckoning that is going to come. This reckoning, and you see the increased anger about AOC and Bernie. Even Jacobin now has the balls to criticize AOC and Bernie Sanders now, just because there's overwhelmingly dislike over her. And her politics has failed. It's just a fact. If you look at how she is as unpopular as Kamala Harris, even though she quote unquote support popular policies, that because her politics and her willingness to be just a PR agent of a Democratic Party while stealing working class people's money has grossly offended the real left. And she knows this. That's why she had to go on Pod Save America. She can't even go on social Democrat-like channels. She has to go full establishment because she lost any support from the left. Even people that are to the right of me had enough of AOC and her fake gaslighting nonsense. And my friend, Comrade Missy, predicted that she's going to be the next Nancy Pelosi, and that's exactly what's going on. When you look at her pro-war votes, when you see how she's whipping support for the Democrat Party, that is exactly what her role is right now. She completely abandoned the left, and anyone on the left who's propping her up, they're just being willful idiots, and she's not even trying to appeal to them anymore.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point. She did used to go on kind of left-wing shows, on shows that were still loyal to the Democratic Party, but did that kind of like pretending to be angry about neoliberalism and the like. And she wouldn't even show her face there anymore because she can't get asked one critical question. She confines herself now to the studios of CNN and MSNBC and these Pod Save America type podcasts where she's treated basically, the transformation is complete. She basically is Nancy Pelosi now. Politico welcomed her to the fold just a few months ago with an article entitled, The Evolution of AOC. And the subheadline was something like, she went from being an outsider to the ultimate team player. The thing that I find so sickening about it is that in reality, she and Bernie, who convinced people they were waging a war against the Democratic establishment, as you say, if you turn on Rachel Maddow or Chris Hayes or Anderson Cooper or read the op-ed page of the New York Times, you know what you're getting. Those are people who are hardcore partisans of the Democratic Party. They're speaking to hardcore partisans of the Democratic Party. They're not hiding who they are. They're exactly who they say they are, which is they want you to vote Democrat all the time. What makes AOC and Bernie so insidious is that in a lot of ways they've become the most important weapon of the Democratic Party establishment. Its most valuable asset. At the same time, they were pretending to undermine it because you don't need to convince Rachel Maddow fans to go and vote Democrat. They're going to vote Democrat no matter what. What you need are the kind of younger people who don't really like the Democratic Party, whose self-identity depends on keeping the Democratic Party at a distance, who may not vote, who may vote for Cornel West as a protest. And AOC and Bernie are the ones who lead those people, the ones you really need to get out their asses and go vote every 2 years and to vote for the Democratic Party without fail. So at the same time, they're telling people and collecting money based on the fraudulent image that they're enemies of the Democratic Party establishment. They, in fact, are its most important instruments.
And it really makes me upset because I was part of the Bernie campaign. And I don't know if you remember the Bernie Sanders rallies. And I remember there'd be a lot of seniors or any person struggling with disease or anyone struggling with poverty. These people would give their testimony at these Bernie rallies. I don't know if you guys remember this. And they were talking about how we were bankrupt. I'm just giving an example. They were talking about how they're bankrupted because they don't have Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. They would be damn near crying. And when the whole crowd would be crying to Bernie Sanders. And Bernie Sanders and AOC would look these people right in their eyes and say, we will fight for you. We will fight for your health care. Meanwhile, Medicare for all is dead. They're endorsing a guy who said they would veto Medicare for all. What? That's absolutely disgusting.
He said he would veto it. He would veto it, even if it passed.
Yes. Even if somehow Bernie and AOC did a miracle and got it to pass, Biden would veto it. And AOC is not putting even any pressure on them. In fact, Biden helped privatize Medicaid and helped kick millions of people off their insurance. I give David Sirota a lot of props for reporting on that. So Biden kicked off millions of people off of healthcare, and the healthcare champion Bernie Sanders endorsed that guy. After looking at cancer patient in the eye, and you look at YouTube, I'm sure all of them still up. Looks all these people in the eye and said, we will fight for you. These people with medical debt. I got family who suffer from medical debt. They look me in the eye and they say they're going to fight for us. And now they completely capitulated to the worst neoliberal war criminal scumbags. Once again, the reckoning just started. They don't even know what's coming. Like this, he's going to continue.
You know, speaking of that, people with medical debt and people who are really struggling economically, there's this, polls show that one of Biden's vulnerabilities, his main vulnerability is the perception that he's just too old to run. But a secondary vulnerability that's very significant is the fact that people do not perceive the economy as healthy, as producing benefits for their lives, which ultimately is all that matters. And you have this new cottage industry of very wealthy people like Chris Hayes with his Comcast contract that's worth many millions of dollars a year, and writers at the Atlantic, who now are kind of, you can see how these scripts form. Nick, I know for a fact they all talk to each other all day. They're on the same list. There used to be that journalist list that was run by Ezra Klein, that when it was exposed kind of became a scandal because journalists aren't supposed to be spending all day colluding with one another and collaborating with one another and speaking to and for each other, but that's exactly what they were doing. And obviously, if you're on a list, it creates this kind of pressure to conform to the orthodoxies of the liberal establishment, which is the worst possible thing you can have for journalists. But they still have these lists. They still have these group chats that they're all in. And you see these scripts emerge. And the new script is Americans are dumb for thinking the economy is bad because, in fact, the economy is good. And it's being done and said by people for whom the economy is very good, like Chris Hayes, who doesn't have any medical debt or any kind of debt, but in fact, many millions of dollars a year in a contract to host an MSNBC show for 1 hour a night. You've been talking about that and about this thing you're calling Bidenomics. What do you mean by all of that?
So the campaign strategy of Joe Biden in order to win over Americans on the economy is to have millionaires like Joe Scarborough tell Americans to quit whining and everything's okay. I think there's an estimate that he makes around $50,000 per episode, and that's before bonuses. You get bonuses for ratings. So you get $50,000 per day.
And his wife is by his side making her own major contract.
Absolutely great point. So this is the message. This is the strategy for Democrats: have millionaires tell working class people that they're struggling. And this is why even when you look at Democrats, only 25% of Democrats strongly approve of Joe Biden's economy. 40% of Democrats don't like Joe Biden's economy, and that number is way worse. He's the worst president on the economy in the modern era, based on polls at this point. And there's shocking numbers, and this is why you're seeing a new era of Black leftists like RBN, like Black Power Media, and Black Agenda Report, and many others that are calling out the truth on the Biden administration and Bidenomics that's failing us, because there's a shocking number that you will never hear on Morning Joe that ever since April, Black Americans make up 90% of the unemployment surge. So Bidenomics is for white bourgeoisie liberals. It's not for us and the workers. The Democratic Party is the party of Wall Street. They're the party of suburbia. And that's why it's even more shameful that people like Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman is turning their back on the hood, even though Barack Obama and Joe Biden is responsible for the surge in racial income inequality. Despite being 13% of the homeless population, Black Americans make 40% of the homeless populations. And look at how blue states like California is handling that. We have my brother from Revolutionary Blackout, CJ. He volunteers at Skid Row every month feeding these people. I was feeding people, homeless people in Kansas City. And this is a problem that Democrats are horrible on because they are bought off by real estate developers and landlords. So when people like AOC and Bernie Sanders, despite this fact, keep calling these people the lesser evil, it shows that they are deeply unserious. And that's just scratching the surface of economics, Glenn. Scratching the surface.
I want to talk to you about something. I don't think we ever talked about this before, so I don't fully know your views on this or really know your views on it at all, which is something I've been starting to notice a lot more. I think it's actually getting worse, or maybe I'm just focused on it more, which is the complete predominance of culture war issues when it comes to left liberal discourse. I have spent my career talking about a kind of set of issues that is about things like the evils of the U.S. security state, the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, spying, privacy, free speech, corporatism, the capture of government and regulatory processes by large corporations. Those are the issues on which I've focused most. I've never thought that meant that those were the only issues that matter. I know there are issues on which I don't focus, including, say, healthcare policy, which I don't focus on because I don't know very much about it. I don't have, an expert level understanding to offer. But certainly those issues have always been very important to left liberal politics. I mean, all those years when I was focused on them, I was considered as part of the left, as being on the left, precisely because those issues have been so important. If you now go and watch or listen to kind of the leading independent left liberal media outlets, I'm not talking about Revolutionary Blackout Network, which is the real left. I'm talking about the part of the left that identifies as the left, but still kind of the AOC Bernie left, all the things that you just described about them. It is really almost culture war issues and trans issues and those sorts of things to the exclusion of almost everything else. There's currently this kind of cancellation campaign underway aimed at the Young Turks, and in particular, Cenk Uygur and Ana Kasparian, the two hosts, because there's some, they started in some way because they started talking in kind of a right-wing way about crime and homelessness, because sort of the standard, a conservative is a liberal who got mugged. They were, I guess Anna was walking on the street and started getting bothered by homeless people and started ranting and raving about crime, and they endorsed Rick Caruso. But really the true precipitating event was Ana Kasparian's heresy on not trans issues in general, where I would say she supports the kind of general trans agenda of legal rights and the like for trans people, 95%, probably more than most Americans do. But, some of these kind of turf talking points about language that gets used for female reproductive parts that she's offended by and things of that nature, the sports issue. And what really amazes me is, for me, the Young Turks has for years taken all kinds of positions that should be totally anathema to left liberal politics. I mean, Ana Kasparian, in what looked like a paid interview for NATO, interviewed Madeleine Albright, one of the worst warmongers in the world, and he praised on her for like an hour straight. Nobody cared. No one resigned from the Young Turks over it, because these issues of like imperialism and militarism and corporatism almost have no weight at all in a lot of left-wing discourse now. In fact, if you talk about those things, they almost code as being on the right. And I'm just wondering what you make of that. If you agree with that analysis that the culture war is kind of drowning out these other issues, I think in part because it's just so much easier and lower hanging fruit to take on. But also, if you do agree with it, what do you make of it? Why is that happening?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna avoid mentioning names here, but there's so many people on the fake left that they take their cues of leftism based on the Democratic Party, whether they will acknowledge that or not. And so their biggest issues are whatever Nancy Pelosi is tweeting about. And then they may take a further left position for that. Nancy Pelosi she would tweet about the importance of the Supreme Court, and they would say we need to expand the Supreme Court, or they would talk about abortion rights because Democrats took these things out. And obviously the trans issues is another one. And that's how they define their leftism. And they play a game with the right. And this is where the red-blue game is fraudulent in a lot of ways, where they push out the culture war, and both the left and the right are both massively guilty of this, because I do not think it's a coincidence in an era where Americans are more class conscious than ever, where Americans are ready for a third party, where Americans want health care, when they want actually living wage, when they want actually economic reforms, that now they now
and an end to endless war, and an end to endless war as well.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yes, and there was in our generation, because I grew up during the Iraq War, and that's why I focus on foreign policy first and foremost on RBN. Because it radicalized the entire generation. So to distract people from war, which the Democratic Party escalating on, and to distract from the homeless issue they're complicit with the growing police state that we're being surrounded by, they have to push culture war issues. And I think there is legitimate concerns that if you're from the trans community or from any community to fight for your rights, that's a legitimate struggle. My question is, why is there a random white guy in Kentucky where there's like 3 trans people within a 500-mile radius who's tweeting about this issue every single day? And it's because he's being programmed by the media, the right-wing media, and the left-wing media that's more than happy to do the dance with them about that. See, now at Revolutionary Blackout, we define the traditional left values of challenging and implementing reforms on the government and actual social revolutionary reform as leftism, challenging empire as leftism, addressing material reality as leftism, which is why the fact that anyone gave TYT credibility before was absurd. When you look at Anna Consparian's insane anti-homeless takes, when you look at the fact that they pretty much support the Democratic Party's push for every single war, and there's many other left bourgeoisie commentators like Sam Cedar, who famously said in a debate with Jackson Hinkle that he don't care about how much the police is funded more. Like, so these actual real issues on the role of state and government power in the military industrial complex and the prison industrial complex, it pales in comparison whenever Anna Consparian says something that's right in the middle of the road where I'm from in Missouri, Glenn. And now this is a question I propose for these leftists like that freaking out over TYT, Anna Consparian, and the ilk. Do they realize that if you go to Brazil, there are many Black evangelical socialists and communists who support Lula, who are very economically left. Many of them are socialists and communists, and they are evangelical. And they do not have the standard position of the liberals regarding gay rights and the such, and abortion and the such. So who are you guys actually fighting for? Are we not fighting for these people? There are very good people I know in the Midwest that may have ignorant takes. So are they being canceled? Are we fighting for Medicare for all, or Medicare for only the people with good takes on the trans issue? Now, I think we should take any time when we're movement building to educate people, and that's what I do. I stand in solidarity with my trans and gay brothers. I know a lot of them. I got a lot of great friends, so I stand in solidarity. I try to educate people away from bigoted views, but you do that while building a movement to address people's material needs, because that bond is how you break those ignorant cycles. But Glenn, what do? They cancel. They shut down discourse. They don't want debate. They don't want people to get together and learn from each other, even correcting each other and organizing against the establishment. So people like TYT and many other liberals who's going after them right now, their job is to pick the culture war and divide the worker, just like the establishment won. Just in a nutshell, Glenn.
You know, I think the last point is such an important one. I mean, I do want to say, like, I also think there is a commercial motive to it, which is I can tell you for sure, you know, I almost never cover trans issues on the show. Again, it's not because I don't think they're important. I think for a lot of people, they're important in ways that you alluded to. But I'm just telling you, you know, if I did it once or twice a night, it's the easiest content in the world to do. You know, you just kind of connect to some like controversy about like some athlete or someone using the bathroom or some like male prisoner and a female who got put into a female facility or whatever. People get really riled up by it. You don't have to do much preparation. It doesn't take much research. The view count goes up. I think it's one of the reasons, but I also think the main reason is that it's one of the very few places where the Republican Party and the Democratic Party actually have a difference. I think that's why these kind of right-wing polemicists who are obsessed with anti-trans rhetoric are kind of in a codependent relationship with the people who are on the left wing who are just as obsessed with it. They kind of need each other because it is an easy way out to avoid talking about Ukraine or militarism or the control of the internet by the CIA and the FBI and this court ruling that just happened, the persecution of anti-establishment voices on both the left and the right, including that case of the black radicals who are now prosecuted by the Biden DOJ as Russian agents, which almost nobody in the left liberal media even bothered to cover, let alone denounce. It's kind of like an easy way out. I think you're exactly right as well. The reason why the gay and lesbian movement ultimately ended up successful is not because activists in the movement went around demanding that everybody who uttered a heretical view got fired or banned or ignored or whatever. There were a lot of people who were potential allies of the left, including a lot of African Americans who were very religious, who were taught that gay and lesbian relationships are sinful, and the ability to engage with people and to engage in dialogue with them and to work with them ultimately is what convinced people that a lot of these demonization images that they had been given about gay men and lesbians were wrong. It was through engagement and interaction and like a respectful, engaged dialogue. And ultimately, it was really about nothing other than, as you say, kind of just interacting with people in a normal, healthy way without bashing them over the head or telling them they were irredeemably evil people. And this seems to be exactly the antithesis of what a lot of left-wing politics is about. And I think in a lot of ways, it's because it's the easy way out. If you get to denounce people, if you get to call people evil, you get to sit back and say, God, I've done my job. I'm a really good person. And that is politics to them.
Yeah, that's how they convince themselves they're good people, even though they may have gotten their wealth through ill-gotten means. How many videos have we seen from Raytheon talking about their diversity, right? Wall Street, who plundered and destroyed black wealth, talking about how they got diversity programs to get black women in high positions of power.
Remember the CIA ad about the woman who was like with various forms of mental health pathologies and, a first generation non-binary immigrant. And this is the CIA touting this.
Yeah, and they replace actual liberation of the working class and improving material needs for these suburban bourgeoisie issues, to be frank. And that's how they sleep well at night, even though they support blue dog Democrats, even though they vote for Joe Biden, who is escalating World War III. That's how they sleep at night. Now, I want to go back kind of to the social war issues as well, because I feel like there are a lot of people who are taught to skip steps, and maybe that benefit the Democratic Party. Maybe you can make the argument, but a lot of them have adopted this authoritarian mindset that is not helpful. Even if I agree with you guys on the premise of the social issues, having this authoritarian mindset where we're not going to have a community built where we educate people the way every single social movement ever works. Instead, you guys said we're going to rely on the government stranglehold over Twitter and social media to censor people, cut people off for community, and ban people from organizing together. The best way to have a real empathy-based working class is have one that's one to have conversation and grow from each other, and that comes from us acknowledging each other's material needs, and that is not what the liberal bourgeoisie class that support Joe Biden has in common with us. So what do, Glenn? They peddle in nonstop culture war nonsense. Anna Kasparian, for example, since we mentioned her before, is a multi-millionaire who never worked a real honest day in her life. So what does she have to connect herself to the worker that makes it like they're on the side? It's just nonstop red, blue culture war nonsense, and that's what it is.
Absolutely. Nick, we have Michael Tracy standing by for a few minutes, and the control room told me that, as he always does, he's getting quite bitchy while he waits. So we don't want to
no worries.
Get him on and have him be even more petulant than he normally is. But I really enjoyed the conversation with you. I really want to encourage people to watch your videos. You're now on Rumble, is that correct? Are you guys putting all of your content on Rumble? So I hope people will watch you there. You're obviously on YouTube, which I hope people will not watch you there. I think Rumble is a much better platform. But either way, I hope you watch. We've had, obviously, Sabian, and there's still a couple of people from your network I want to have on my show because the content is uniformly thought-provoking. It's always very informative, and I think people who don't share your ideology will have a lot to learn by listening. So I hope you will seek them out. Just tell people where they can find you for those who would like to.
Yeah, we've been censored and throttled on YouTube a lot, so we are on Rumble now, and we've been greatly enjoying our time on Rumble. So check us out on Revolutionary Blackout on Rumble, and we also on the RBN. We stream almost every single day. Last night I had Aaron Good and David Tabboot on. We was talking about RFK and JFK and the assassination. And one thing that we were talking about that I know you talk about all the time is how liberals became the pro-CIA party, and how even though Trump talked about the deep state, they're actually a legitimate permanent state that the left must engage and must have as their number one priority, which AOC and the left, they don't do at all. And I got a lot of criticisms of RFK Jr. I made it very vocal, especially regarding Israel, but I do give him a lot of credit regarding calling out the deep state, the CIA, and intelligence agencies, because if you don't, you're deeply unserious. But anyway, it's always fun, Glenn. It's always a very thought-provoking show. Very cathartic as well. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I feel the same way. It's great to talk to you. We will definitely talk to you again shortly. Have a great evening.